Welcome to the Beau Show. Most people know by now that Elon Musk is attempting to purchase Twitter. And that has been delayed just a bit as Musk tries to find out exactly what percentage of Twitter users are not real people, but bots. But perhaps just as important, if not more, we are starting to get a real look into the internal workings of Twitter, even as this deal develops. Project Veritas, an investigative group founded by James O'Keefe, has unearthed some very disturbing things from Twitter employees and executives. I've covered Project Veritas before and the excellent work that they do. You know, if it weren't for Veritas, we wouldn't have known about the community organizing group Acorn that was tied to Barack Obama, as well as some of the things that have happened inside of Planned Parenthood, and admissions of voter fraud, and revelations from whistleblowers inside of Google, Facebook, and many other left-leaning groups that attempt to present the facade of being politically neutral. People, especially conservatives, have wondered why on social media that their views or posts or groups get censored. You may even wonder why most mainstream media outlets have a leftist bias. And that perhaps is more transparent because most newsrooms are comprised of largely liberal people. And that, of course, affects the types of stories chosen and the way that they are presented. This is a blind spot for many media organizations, and I have experienced it firsthand. In other words, they are unaware of their own bias. Rather than having an ideologically diverse group of people who can offer alternative story ideas or pitches, they don't place themselves in diverse rooms. So they have a homogenous voice. Let's use the example of Nick Sandmann, the Covington Catholic student who was slandered by the media. If one person in a newsroom just spoke up and said, "Hey, is this the entire video we are seeing, or are we missing any context?" it's likely that that story would have been presented entirely differently. But either someone was a really, really awful journalist who had an equally awful editor, or the idea was to run with the story anyway, without proper context, because they thought that it showed what internally they wanted America to see. And that is confirmation bias, or finding a conclusion that already supports one's worldview. Did no one in these newsrooms speak up? Were they intimidated from speaking up? Or were the newsrooms so chock full of one worldview that it completely went over their heads, and they forgot everything they ever learned as a journalist about multiple sources and giving proper context? With social media, the standards are actually even lower. They have managed to hide behind their so-called terms of service, which essentially gives them a very long leash to determine what they view as misinformation or dangerous on their platforms. January 6th gave them the perfect alibi to begin further monitoring and censoring content in a more obvious way. Pursuant to that are the people making those decisions, which are once again shielded largely from public view so that they don't have to answer questions. They don't really want you to know what they think and how they operate. Well, Project Veritas is revealing this in a series of undercover videos, and they are worth discussing because once again, major mainstream media is not going to touch this with a 10-foot pole. It reveals exactly what happens in their own newsrooms. It's an inconvenient truth, and it's certainly newsworthy. So let's take a listen to Project Veritas's first undercover video with Twitter's senior engineer, Saru Murugesan.
So do you think there's a difference between Twitter's definition of free speech and Elon's definition of free speech?
Twitter does not believe in free speech. Elon believes in free speech.
What do your colleagues say about it?
They hate it. Some of my colleagues are like super left. You know, our jobs are at stake. He's a capitalist. If we weren't really operating like capitalists more, we were very socialist. Like we're all like communist. I basically went to work like 4 hours a week last quarter. That's just how it works in our company. But Twitter is like mental health is everything. Like if you're not feeling it, you can take a few days off. People have taken months off.
And I don't know if the two parties can truly coexist on one platform.
So right off the bat, this engineer is admitting that Twitter is not a free speech platform, that it is actually, in his words, commie as F. He knows that Elon Musk truly believes in free speech, but Twitter as a company does not. Take a listen to this.
Theologically, it does not make sense, like, because we're actually censoring the right, not the left. Because everyone on the right wing will be like, bro, it's okay to say, you just gotta tolerate it. The left will be like, no, I'm not gonna tolerate it. I need it censored, or else I'm not gonna be in the content. So it does serve the right. It's true, there is a bias. That is what it is today.
Now, this is important because it explains a fundamental difference between the right and the left, and what we call tolerance. Murugeson rightly notes that the right will usually just suck it up and tolerate things because they unfortunately have to move on with their lives outside of a bubble. However, the left will not tolerate it. They will demand censorship or they will leave the platform. This is what you would call intolerant. So Twitter is thus kowtowing to the left by censoring conservatives and not treating leftist content the same. And here's his insight into how his colleagues feel about Musk's purchase of Twitter.
What do your colleagues say about it?
They hate it. Oh my god, I'm at least like okay with it, but some of my colleagues are like super left.
What are they saying?
They're like, this will be my last day if it happens. So,
Has much changed since like Elon's coming out?
a lot has changed. A lot has changed. Like we're stress eating a lot. Like we're all like worried for our jobs.
Why are you guys so worried though?
You know, our jobs are at stake. He's a capitalist. If we weren't really operating like capitalist mode, we were very socialist. Like we're all like communist.
Like I started working for Twitter and became left. I think it's just like the environment. Like you're there and you become like calm. You don't understand. They call it California for some reason. Elon makes some good points. Sometimes I'm slowly starting to buy his side a little bit.
See, this is what I'm talking about when you insulate yourself with only a circle of similar thinking people. He refers to California. And while he may be more fair-minded when it comes to Elon Musk's ideas, you can see how his colleagues are balking big time. And why be so afraid of losing your job if you've been a fair, diligent employee? Well, it probably means that you think Musk is some evil guy because all you've ever done in life is surround yourself with leftism and leftists. And interestingly enough, even though Murugeson is a socialist-type leftist, he recognizes that capitalism gives him the opportunity to make more money if he works harder and gets promoted.
Basically, when I work like 4 hours a week last quarter, that's just how it works in our company.
Yeah.
But I start putting in more hours because I want to get promoted.
Yeah, of course.
And I feel like because of inflation, my buying power has like reduced a little bit. And I want to get promoted so that like they inflate your salary a little, like they increase your salary by a lot when you get promoted.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sure, let me just try for it right now.
It's interesting to me that he recognizes our current inflation, which is the direct result of printing fake money and devaluing the dollar, which is exactly what socialist Venezuela did. It's such a revealing thing when socialists have to face the reality of their bad policies and then cling back to capitalism so that they can have better lives and more prosperity. Murugeson also notes that there is a communist culture and system within Twitter in terms of the fact that they don't prioritize profit. They allow employees to just take as many days off as they want, and the business suffers. That's probably another reason why they are scared of Elon Musk, because he's a business guy. He's a capitalist who wants businesses to be run productively. The lax policies Twitter has had internally may change. And remember that Elon Musk's definition of free speech is that which abides by the prevailing law. If people want less free speech, he argues, they will get lawmakers to change it. Otherwise, anything outside of those basic parameters is against the will of the people. I think that seems to be a rather reasonable definition of free speech. But clearly, that is not what Twitter was all about. Last Tuesday, Project Veritas also published interesting thoughts by Twitter's lead client partner, Alex Martinez. Let's get some insight into the tremendous brain of Alex Martinez.
Advertisers are freaking out because of what he's like tweeting about, like being like, I want free speech, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
Like, who really knows what that even means?
Like, now is Twitter's definition of free speech the same as Elon's?
Apparently, according to him, no. As an advertiser, as my business is what I do every day, and why I go out is like, we want it to be as fair and transparent and accurate as possible.
Yeah.
And if that means there's a level of censorship to make it correct, quote unquote, again, and what does correct mean? I guess like it just kind of goes into the idea of like, well, what is correct? Like every idea of like, you know, it's kind of like the principle of being like good and bad. Like good and bad exists, and it's either is bad or it's either good. It's not like a mix of good and bad. It's like one or the other, and it's like kind of the same idea of like, is it truthful or is it lies, or is it a mix of truth and lies? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, where do you draw the line?
That's my concern, though. That's why I hate this deal so much. Elon's gonna f*** everything up.
Don't. He might try to, but there are people that are going to try to push back as much as they can, because we are doing, the rest of us who have been here believe in something that's good for the planet and not just to give people free speech. But I think when he has to talk to the employees and face the music and be like, this is, because again, like, these people really do believe in what we're doing, and so like, if people are gonna, they're not just gonna be like, these are the policies we've put in place for misinformation or mislabeling media or whatever.
Yeah.
Why do you think this should be taken down?
Yeah.
Like, those are the questions they're gonna ask him.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
It's going to be hard for him to be like, oh, because people should make their own decision. It's like, no, but people don't know how to make a rational decision if you don't put out correct things that are supposed to be out in the public.
Oh boy, so much info in here. For one, Martinez talks how every millennial you've ever heard does, with the word like being used every fourth word. He says they want to do something good for the planet and not just give people free speech. This is a value statement. He thinks helping the planet, whatever that means, is superior to a person's First Amendment rights. So thus, any censorship is helping the planet somehow. He's right to say that people don't know how to make a rational decision if they don't have correct information. Okay, so then why did Twitter suspend the New York Post for publishing a very correct story about Hunter Biden? Why were accounts who reposted that story suspended? We know now that many Biden voters have buyer's remorse because they did not know that information in November of 2020. This is how the left ends up with their foot in their mouth.